Gethsemane Gospel Global Broadcast. I'm your host, Pastor Tim Sykes. Today, again, in the studio, I'm excited to have, again, my good friend, Dr. Kerry W. Tillman. Dr. Tillman is the senior pastor at the West Point Baptist Church here in Galveston. He's also the state president for the American Baptist General Convention of Texas, Incorporated, and the moderator of the Eastern District Association of Texas, correct?
Roughly so.
And currently he is still presiding as the president of the Baptist Ministers Association of Galveston and Galveston County. Welcome, Pastor Tillman. I had shared with Pastor Tillman the first time I interviewed him, excuse me, that I wanted to bring him back and talk about African-American Baptist church history in Galveston and Galveston County. Pastor Tillman, in my research, and it's arguably because it's stating that in 1787 in Philadelphia, the Black church was born out of protest and revolutionary reaction to racism. Somewhere around after the and they were saying that the St. George Methodist Church Methodist preacher Absalom Jones and Richard Allen and other Black members left the church and formed the Free African Society, which kind of set in place in motion all over the country some other churches to kind of fall in place behind what was established there in Philadelphia. But throughout my research, I discovered, because it's still debating, that they said the oldest Black Baptist church was the first African Baptist church founded around 1790 by a slave by the name of Peter Durrett, and then it goes into the oldest Black Catholic church and things of that nature. But I want to bring it home to Galveston, and let's open up with talking about the historic Avenue L Missionary Baptist Church. Let's talk about the history of Avenue L. What can you tell me about the establishments? They're saying somewhere around the early 1850s.
The story is that around 1840, I want to say, the First Baptist Church of Galveston, the white First Baptist Church of Galveston, soon formulated a colored, Black, whatever the word was.
Right.
And they organized what would become Avenue L Baptist Church.
Okay, so the first Baptist church over it, the white congregation. Mm-hmm. Okay.
They used to meet up in the loft, of course, and then they started letting them meet in a separate building, and then finally they established them as their own church. I think their initial name might have been Africa Baptist Church.
Yes, it stated that it was Africa Baptist Church somewhere in the early 1850s. After 1840, they had it named as the Colored Baptist Church by the Reverend James Huckins in 1840. And then somewhere around the early 1850s, they left First Baptist to worship in a separate building known as the Africa Baptist Church.
Right. That's the story that I was given. And then I want to say Israel Campbell.
Yes.
Is kind of who brought it to prominence. He's responsible, so I'm told, for organizing Lincoln District Association.
Yes.
And also Lincoln Southern District.
Yes.
So it's a little younger than Lincoln District.
Right. Now, is that still in existence today?
Both of them are in existence today.
Because I know
Lincoln Southern is where Singleton used to be moderated.
Okay. Because I had it confused because I didn't know. I thought Singleton was Lincoln, but it's Lincoln Southern.
Lincoln Southern.
Okay. And so Gethsemane is affiliated with Lincoln District. Okay. Now this guy, the Reverend Israel S. Campbell, it says that it was reorganized after the Civil War as the first regular Missionary Baptist Church in somewhere around the time period of 1867. And then, of course, it goes on into the church being destroyed in the 1900 storm. And then the African-American firm, the Tanner Brothers, contractors and architects in 1916 kind of helped develop and restore that.
Was this the original white building or brick building in front?
I think it's saying here that it was rebuilt by an African-American firm, the Tanner Brothers, and then they started adding the brick and everything to it.
I never did know how that worked.
Okay, so are you familiar with them stating about the pastorate of, there was a Reverend P.A. Shelton somewhere around 1903. I think he stayed there for 1 year.
I never heard of him.
P.A. Shelton, he kind of came after Israel Campbell, and then followed by H.M. Williams.
No, that's where I come. Now, by the way, I was not alive for any of this. This is all
right.
This is all the report that I received from the old pastor.
Okay, so H.M. Williams, and he served from like 1904 to 1933.
It's just a few years.
Yeah, that's a few years. Like you've been at West Point with 38,
yeah, well, I see.
Approaching 40 years.
29, 33. I mean, you said 04?
Yes, 1904 to 1933. So Dr. Gates served at Mount Moriah 44 years. 44 years. Now let's come up to the Reverend G.L. Prince era, 1934 to 1956. What can you tell? Or let me back up. Did you know anything about the leadership and the pastoralship of H.M. Williams?
Only that it was almost the only game in town, the only Black Baptist church in town at the time.
Okay.
And so that gave it its prominence, but it birthed Mount Olive, Macedonia, and Trinity.
Oh, wow. So it birthed 3 other churches, Mount Olive, Trinity, and Macedonia. Wow. Okay. Now I never knew that. That's interesting.
Those 3 churches link their history back
Okay.
directly to Avenue L.
Now, seeing here where it says that Reverend H.M. Williams served as the moderator of the Lincoln District Baptist Association as well, is it normal or under the regular affiliation that the pastor at Avenue L had this affiliation with Lincoln? Because I'm seeing, because after we talk about the Reverend G.L. Prince,
Prince would be president of
National Baptist Convention,
but his twin brother was president of Missionary Baptist State.
Oh wow, he had a twin brother. Okay, and did he pastored a church as well
in Waco?
In Waco?
No, in Dallas.
In Dallas. Okay. So G.L. Prince, and G.L. Prince served from 1934 to 1956.
No. Yeah.
Or somewhere around there. And then they're saying that not only did he serve as the National Baptist Convention of America, but they said that he was also the president of a Mary Allen College in Crockett. Wow.
He was his brother was a state president, and they had a college and a hospital.
A college and a hospital. Now this was a Black college and a Black hospital.
Black college and a Black hospital in Crockett, Texas.
Wow. That's
owned and operated by Missionary Baptist General Convention of Texas.
Now, do you know today is the Mary Allen College still in existence?
The buildings are there, but the college is no longer in existence. Somewhere in the late 70s, they sold it.
Okay.
And the emphasis was shifted to Bishop College.
Bishop College. Okay. I've heard of Bishop College. So many prominent pastors have come through there.
Now, Bishop was originally in Marshall.
in Marshall, Texas.
And then they moved it to Dallas.
Okay, that Pastor Gates was born in the Marshall, Texas area, so he had some affiliation with Bishop. I know that I think Ralph Douglas West came out of Bishop.
Or any number.
Several number of prominent pastors came out of Bishop College. So now I've heard from Pastor Gates that the Reverend G.L. Prince commanded a crowd. He said that the church would be running over, and this is Pastor Gates's account of the Reverend G.L. Prince, that he would take a old wood folding chair and set it right at the altar, open the Bible and teach from it, and would hold the attention of the entire crowd. What can you tell me about the Reverend G.L. Prince that you knew about?
The word that is often used regarding Dr. Prince was that he was a great orator.
A great orator.
You would probably not classify him as a great preacher in what we term great preaching, but he was a great orator.
Okay.
And he probably would end his sermon with a great poem, profound poem, or maybe the lyrics of a hymn or something like that. He's in Greece. How sweet the sound.
Okay.
Something like that.
Right.
But as far as a celebration that we often bring to the message,
which is labeled as the hoop or a celebratory closing, he wasn't of that magnitude.
McKean didn't either. So.
Wow. So, and then now I want to talk about the Reverend R.E. McKean, who on record they're saying that he served from 1957, the year after Reverend Prince, from 1957 to 1978. At that time period, I lived in the immediate neighborhood of Avenue L, because I lived on 25th and L. And I would remember walking to the little park right next door to Avenue L, which was called Ziegler Park. Had a little sign up that said Ziegler Park. Had a couple of little things for kids, a little merry-go-round and slide. And I remember hanging out there, but oftentimes would be walking by the church and would see the Reverend R.E. McKean. And one thing I noticed about him as a kid, he had a little mustache, kind of similar to the dictator Adolf Hitler. But he had it wasn't like this type of mustache, the type of mustache he wore, but it was just a little square patch of a mustache right here in the center of his. So what can you tell me? Because he served as moderator, right, of the Lincoln District Association. And what can you tell me about Pastor Reverend McKean?
I knew of him, and I considered him, God forgive me, as the Black Hitler, because that same look that you're talking about.
Right.
But as far as his preaching, I was never exposed to it.
Okay.
As a youngster.
Mm-hmm.
I would frequent Avenue L, but I think it was either in his latter days or as he was, fading out, and Reverend Cummins must have been becoming pastor.
Now, did Reverend Cummings serve as the pastor of the church or an interim?
No, he was the pastor.
He was the pastor. How long did he serve?
Between 5 and 7 years. So
okay.
Whenever McKean died, he served until they called Berry.
Okay.
Whatever that time lasted.
Okay, and then because it's saying that, or in some records from the Rosenberg Library, that when Pastor McKean served and also served as the Lincoln District Association, that a construction began on the church in 1916 and was completed at a cost of about $18,000 during that time period.
In 1916?
In 1916, they kind of completed the bricking. 1916.
So that would have been H.M. Williams.
H.M. Williams. That's when they completed, not McKean, I'm sorry, Williams. Mm-hmm. They completed the bricking of the church at the cost of about $18,000.
Well, what you will notice, I think, that if you go around town, there's a almost a trademark of churches built in that particular era. Mount Olive, West Point, Macedonia, these great kind of Gothic-like churches.
Cathedrals,
the stained glass windows. And I mean, it was, when you think of the time that it was done by colored people, Negro, whatever you want to call them, that you really have to applaud the preachers, the pastors, who would go up into East Texas and Central Texas and call Black men to come to Galveston because they had longshoreman work.
Okay.
And then their lives were made better, so the churches were able to build those buildings
with the tithes and offerings that was received.
Exactly. I doubt any of us could rebuild the churches in these days and times
like they did then. Wow, that's interesting, because under the leadership of Pastor Andrew Walker Berry, they said he was elected in 1984. He prior to that, under McKean, they had a big renovation and the installation of air conditioning and heating, and then he refurbished, they said, the stained glass window, and then Pastor Andrew Walker Berry came, and they said around 1993, or somewhere not in 93, but in the early mid 80s, the church membership began to increase again, because it had kind of fallen off, and then it increased again because under his curriculum vitae, I read somewhere that he was accredited to writing songs, and he was a gifted organist and could sing. And now, historically, Andrew Walker Berry, father, I remember, Dr. C.A. Berry out of Houston. He can sing and preach. And then he had a singing brother that was a national priest, C. Vincent Berry, who is now pastoring in Houston. And then, of course, I refer to him as Little Andrew, but Andrew Berry, who pastors New Life over in Texas City. So let's go to the West Point Baptist Church, the history, which will include the original founding pastor all the way up to your calling to pastor the church. Who was the original founding pastor of West Point?
West Point, unfortunately, did not have the kind of record keeping that First Union did. But First Union and Mount Pilgrim were established they were either brothers or cousins. They were Halls.
Halls, Hall. Okay.
And the Hall from First Union would be the first moderator of what was the East, but it was Free Mission Baptist Association.
Free Mission Baptist Association.
And they were started by white churches from the North who came to the South to establish these churches and associations to promote their denomination. And so that's how First Union was created, and then later in the same year, Mount Pilgrim, and then somewhere, depending on which history you go with, West Point was organized, we think, by Reverend G.R. Cushionberry.
Reverend G.R. Cushionberry. Was he African American?
He's African American out of Houston.
Okay.
And but in 1870, you got Mount Pilgrim, First Union, and a church in San Antonio called New Light.
New Light.
They were all organized at the same time.
There was a New Light here in Galveston?
No,
in San Antonio. Okay.
This was the hub of the East.
Okay.
Association.
Okay.
Those churches were formulated. And then West Point is said to have come along on the cornerstone. It says 1882.
1882.
Oral tradition carries it back to 1870, but the cornerstone says 1882.
Okay. So Cushionberry, and then can you pick who?
It was after Cushionberry. There seemed to have been a run of maybe 4 or 5 unknown. We've lost their name.
Okay.
Then it hits 1908, with John Calvin Calhoun.
J.C. Calhoun, that's what he went by, right? I remember talk of him from Pastor Gates, who often told me history about the African American church in Galveston. He remembers Pastor Calhoun, J.C. Calhoun. How long did he serve at West Point?
From 1908 to December the 7th, 1936.
1908 to December 7th,
1936.
Wow. Okay.
And it's 28 years.
Right. But so what I'm seeing now.
He died at 58.
He died at what age?
At age 58.
At 58.
But it was an old 50. That's when 58 was
old. Right.
So it was an old 58.
So
he had served as moderator. He was the state president at the time. And so he was revered by the preachers and pastors of the day and was referred to as the old man.
Wow. Okay. So I've heard you refer to that. Is that a West Point moniker or?
Well, when I say old, I'm OLE.
Okay. Not OLD.
Not OLD.
So let me ask you, Pastor Tillman, because at West Point, J.C. Calhoun, and then
with the same thing that happened at Avenue Hill in terms of Cummins succeeding Hitler.
McKean.
When Cummins, the church called Reverend Cummins because he was McKean's Joshua.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Same thing happened at West Point. When Calhoun was down, I don't know how long he was down sick before he died, but when he was down, A.C. Holiday was his Joshua.
So A.C. Holiday was already there. He didn't come there to pastor. He was already there.
That carried on service for the old man.
Okay. Now that kind of it don't scare me, but it because I'm 50. I'll be 57 in June. Totally different era. So did they ever find out what the cause of death was?
I never knew that. I knew his granddaughter. She's passed on now. Her name was Victoria Calhoun Jordan. And believe it or not, she was a member of Sunlight in Houston where Roy E. Easley used to pastor.
The same Pastor Easley that pastored Mount Pilgrim?
Correct.
Okay, and we're going to get to Mount Pilgrim. So with Pastor Calhoun being there, passing away at the age of 58, because I've learned that in history that the Booker T. Washington died in his mid to late 50s, and the cause of death at that time was labeled as exhaustion from just going, not getting enough rest. Of course, probably with that came a poor diet, not drinking and hydrating enough. So he passed away, got sick, and then died, they said, from exhaustion. And that was like, wow. Because I find myself, just going.
Another interesting fact, if you read some of the history of National Baptist Convention of America,
yes,
I was going through some of their archives, and you'll see a J.C. Calhoun of Texas. It won't say Galveston. They went by states. They would say of Texas.
Did they say what position he served?
He was not an officer, but he was serving on some kind of committee or something. I forget it.
Okay, at the national level.
It just astonished me that his name was there.
Okay, so following Calhoun, who was next?
That's from A.C. Holiday.
A.C. Holiday. So A.C. Holiday, from where I pick up from Pastor Gates telling me that he left West Point, or for whatever reason they expelled him or whatever.
37 to 45.
And then in 45, he established and founded Mount Moriah. And was there, I want to say, maybe 7 years or so.
I think he was there till about 60.
He was there to 1959. And Pastor Gates came to serve, to help and serve. Because Pastor Gates came from Wally Dunn over at...
but he had been a member of West Point.
Pastor Gates? Okay, under
Calhoun.
Oh, okay. See, now that all these years I didn't know. I do know that he was affiliated under Pastor Wiley Dunn, because he told me a story that when Pastor Wiley Dunn sent him to Mount Moriah, it was said to me by Dr. Gates that he said, when a boy get old enough to shave, he ought to have his own restroom. And so he hence sent Pastor Gates to Mount Moriah. And I think Pastor Gates served from 1959 to about 2002. So because he passed away in May 2002. So after AC Holiday, who came after AC Holiday?
J.F. Sargent.
J.F. Sargent.
Yes, sir.
How long did he serve?
Sargent was there from 45 to 76.
45 to 76?
1945 to 76. The second longest serving pastor, 31 years.
So he after you, because are you the longest serving right now? So J.F. Sargent, if I can recall, was he the tall?
He was tall.
Tall gentleman? And did he work for the?
No, he just passed.
Okay. Who was it that worked for the prominent family? Was it a pastor? Davenport. So J.F. Sargent came, served 31 years.
Now, the interesting thing about Sargent was when he came in 45, he had a son in the ministry named F.M. Johnson in Conroe.
The F.M. Johnson that pastored First Baptist in Texas City?
Sargent was the inspiration to get him there.
Wow.
Now, well, let me back up. Allen told Sargent about West Point, F.A. Allen.
That used to be moderator of the Southwest Central District
at the time,
and pastored Mount Calvary.
Correct. At the time, they were Mount Calvary. He told Sargent they were Conroe College buddies.
Right.
So he told Sargent got West Point. He told F.M. Johnson. F.M. Johnson got First Baptist. So F.M. Johnson has a classmate friend named D.N. Benford.
Oh, wow. Wow.
3 years later, he introduces him to Rising Star.
Wow. And we're going to talk about Pastor Benford because that's wow. So it's J.F. Sargent. And then after J.F. Sargent, who comes?
A.L. Curry.
A.L. Curry. Now, I do remember Pastor Curry was great preacher. How long did he serve?
77 to 84.
Okay, and he resigned.
His plan, so he said, was to retire from pastoring and just be an evangelist. And when he resigned from West Point, Nazareth, the church in Roseburg that he left to come to West Point, called him back without him preaching a sermon.
So just knowing that he was leaving West Point, said, hey, would you come back to Nazareth? So he left Nazareth to come pastor West Point.
He left Nazareth, came pastor West Point for 7 years. He's going to retire. And they just extended the call to him.
Wow.
Without him asking, without him.
That speaks significance of his pastoral ministry.
I think he stayed there another 25 years or something.
25. So he just recently passed away not too long ago.
Retired. He finally passed.
Okay. So after A.L. Curry, that brings it to Pastor Kerry W. Tillman.
Yes.
So what was the transition between the Curry era and Dr. Kerry W. Tillman? How did that transition take place? How did that happen?
When Pastor Curry came, the church was, the congregation matched the building.
The congregation matched the building.
The building was in disarray.
Okay.
It was old and, outdated. And the congregation matched the building.
Oh, wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
updated the building.
Updated the building.
Did a major renovation on the entire building.
Okay.
While updating the congregation.
So Pastor Curry did that.
He was the transition figure between me and Sargent. I could not have followed Sargent.
So, okay, so Curry was that guy that came in, made the connection between you and Sargent simply because of what he did.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think you could not have followed?
I couldn't have I don't think I feel Curry's shoes, but I definitely couldn't have to feel Sergeant.
Because this was your novice era, right? You was
I
your
wasn't
first
even preaching when Reverend Sergeant passed. I was a teenager
Okay.
when he retired.
Mhm.
Because he retired in 76, then he passed in 78.
So I thought you were not a kid preacher. How old were you when you?
I was 18.
18. Okay.
1981.
And then so you had a stint over at, was it Mount Zion?
On the mainland.
On the mainland.
T.A. Lee, Reverend Thomas Allen Lee, had a stroke
Mm-hmm.
somewhere between the first and second Sunday in February in 84.
84.
And they sent word for me to come and carry on. He had established, the people like me so, that he had established what they call first and third Saturday night service. And I would preach it every first and third Saturday night.
Saturday night.
They created a service.
Wow.
And I'm in my mind, I think he was trying to introduce me to the people.
Right.
Everybody in Galveston County just knew that would be my church. And when Pastor Curry offered his resignation on the first Sunday in August of the same year, 84,
Okay.
back up, February is when I went over to Mount Zion. March is when I was ordained.
Okay.
Of 84. And then in August of 84, first Sunday, he announced his resignation effective fourth Sunday.
Wow.
In August. First Sunday he preached. Second Sunday was his anniversary. Third Sunday he took vacation. Well, when he went on vacation, I came to preach for him from Mount Zion and preach for him.
Okay.
Thinking, everyone thought that once he gets some rest, he'll rescind his resignation.
Right.
But he didn't. Fourth Sunday he preached his farewell sermon from West Point, and I preached my farewell sermon
At Mount Zion. So in him calling, so you knew Pastor Curry had a connection with him during his pastoral.
Oh Lord, yes.
So, and then he called you to preach. So when he did not rescind his resignation, what prompted, how did the calling of you to become pastor at West Point?
Now that gets real funny, because when I left Mount Zion, people don't believe it, but when I left Mount Zion, no one from West Point had called me or told me anything.
Nobody contacted
There
you.
was no official contact, no deacon, no trustee, no one.
Okay.
I just showed up first Sunday in September to preach.
Wait, you showed up to preach. So how did that? So he
was gone. He left fourth Sunday in August.
Right.
So that week of transition, I went home.
You went back to your home church. Right. Okay.
So I went home.
Okay.
And it was just understood that I would be taking care of the pulpit. That same Sunday, they sent me to the National Convention in Los Angeles.
That same week?
First Sunday in September.
National
Convention started that Monday.
And they sent you?
They sent me.
To Los Angeles.
Paid for me to go to Los Angeles.
Wow. And so when you came, but you wasn't a pastor. So when you came back from the National Convention, walk us through that phase of what happened.
They brought it took from September to April. Well, things really started coming to a head around February, because that's when the church started just getting restless.
Okay.
Because they had brought in the deacons and trustees declared themselves the pulpit committee.
Pulpit committee. Deacons and trustees declared themselves the pulpit. That's what they used to. Right. Okay.
But the church, now it was not that I was the greatest preacher that ever drew breath. They just had their mind made up that they were going to make me be the preacher or make me be their pastor, that they were going to shape me. That's the mindset that the church had. Right. Not the office.
So they brought in several.
They brought in 14.
14 different preachers.
14, trying to get my taste out the folk mouth, if you will.
Wow. And so after that,
now, I don't want you to think when I preach everybody shouted, because it wasn't like that.
well, because you were in your novice years.
But when whoever preached, they would sit on him. I don't care what he did. Their minds were made up. So they wasn't even listening. Because some of those guys could really preach. They got Reverend Ortiz, got Louisiana. They had a Easley Sunday Ministry Proctor out of Beaumont.
Wow.
Oh, they had.
So when this took place,
they even had I wish I could call his name. The reading of the last minutes, Holiday. His name was O.L.
Holiday.
He preached. O.L. Holiday preached. A guy out of they had some heavy hitters. Guy out of his name was Brown from. He was either in Corpus. No, he was in the Corpus Christi area.
Mm-hmm.
Name escapes me right.
So they brought in these
Philip Brown.
Philip Brown. So they brought in these 14, and then after that, the people were kind of just set on Pastor Kerry Tillman.
It got so bad that I had to tell them at a business meeting, if I'm the problem, I'll leave. And the church said, you are not going anywhere.
The church said that. So was there a contention between the deacons and trustees that claimed to be the search committee and the membership?
Oh, yeah. It was a horrible contention.
Okay.
And when they crafted the trustees, they said that they took the previous works of P.S. Wilkinson. When Sergeant retired, P.S. Wilkinson was our state president.
Okay.
He took a liking to West Point. He told it because of Calhoun.
Right.
He told them, you need a preacher that's so and so and so and so in age, with a family, with a wife, and blah, blah, blah. And all the stuff he said did not match me. So in the eyes of the deacons and trustees, I was disqualified because I didn't match what P.S. Wilkinson had told them.
Yes.
Well, the church never said that.
The deacons and the trustees self-proclaimed search committee said it. Wow. So there was a lot of contention there. So during that, how long did that last and take before they finally brought you in and called you as the pastor?
Let me see. Oh, they called me April 8th. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. They set the meeting for April the 1st.
Okay.
And then on the 31st, prior to that Monday would have been the 1st, they brought in a guy you know as Walter Jones.
From New Hope.
Well, he wasn't there then.
Okay.
But they brought him in to preach, and then they pushed it back a week.
Oh, wow.
So
they brought him in as a candidate, potential candidate.
Well, they were trying.
Okay.
But the candidate that I was up against was Singleton.
George W. Singleton.
George W. Singleton.
At Fellowship Baptist over in
just gotten there from St. Paul.
In Brazoria. Mm-hmm. Wow. He had just gotten to
Lamar.
At Fellowship and wanted to be at.
Well, I don't know if he wanted to, but they just put his name on. Now, he did come preach, but they put his name on the list.
Oh, okay. And he was
the vote was 118. No, it's either 125 to 18 or 115 to 25, something like that. It was a lopsided vote.
Wow.
But it had nothing to do with my ability. It had nothing to do with being a great preacher.
So would you think it had something to do with you being a homegrown boy growing up in West Point, and they knew you, they knew your family?
And one of the trustees, he sleeps a long sleep now. His name was James Washington, bless his heart. And he said, give a boy a chance. He don't act right, we put him out. Give
a boy a chance. You don't act right, we'll put him out. And that was the nomenclature of the church, at that time period. Mm-hmm. So they gave you this chance. And your
sermon, my initial sermon, or my acceptance sermon, I guess you would say, was Caleb, give me this mountain.
Wow.
And so every now and then you'll hear Deacon Sanders in particular refer to that message. So I wondered, did Pastor really know what he was asking for? Here I am, 38 years, still trying to climb that mountain.
Wow. Well, you've done a tremendous job in climbing the mountain and bringing people up, all the way, with you up the mountain. Um, this special broadcast, I wanted to bring Pastor Tillman. I think we got about 50. I want to go an hour into this because we got about 15 minutes left, and I want to get really this unction because this is very interesting to me and to a lot of people in Galveston that don't really know the history behind these churches. And man, I want to do some summits and some symposiums on this because I think it's very important for people to understand, especially if they say, "Oh, I grew up at such and such church." And if you ask them historically, well, tell me a little bit about your home church. They can't tell you because they don't know, or they'll know
the history that
they know, or what they heard from mother or father or grandmother or whomever, but they really don't know the struggle.
Well, I tell you, in the words of my father-in-law, what had happened was,
and your father-in-law being
Deacon Opie D. Ross, the late Deacon Opie D. Ross, who was chairman of deacons at the Jerusalem church.
Okay.
If you look at the history of the Baptist church, the Negro, African American, what are we now? That church on the island of Galveston, you can trace how many were just created, did not split from another church. You can narrow it down to just a handful.
Right.
I told you First Union and they were not split.
Right.
St. Luke split from First Union.
St. Luke split from First Union.
100 years ago.
Right.
But they
just like Mount Moriah split from West Point. Now, Mount Olive was one of the
Mount Olive, who came out of Avenue L.
Okay.
Gave birth to Progressive. The following year, they gave birth to Mount Calvary. Okay. And then in the 60s, they gave birth to this church.
To Gethsemane. With the Reverend H.
Of course, gave birth to Market.
The Reverend H.J.
Johnson.
So, and so you were elected to serve as pastor, and you're currently in your 38th year, and you're soon to retire, I say, from, not retire, but you kind of transitioning out of the role of president. You can still be actively involved. In your 38 years as pastor at the West Point Church, what would you say is or has been one of your most challenging moments in pastoral, one of your most challenging moments as a pastor, as it pertains to pastoring the African American church?
West Point, not denominational.
Not denominational.
Greatest challenges at West Point. Probably one of my greatest challenges was navigating, negotiating, whatever you want to call it, through the Ike experience.
The hurricane experience.
Because in 2007, I had just done a major renovation.
Wow.
On the entire campus.
Wow.
I forget how many thousand, but that's when I redid the windows and all. I say we redid the windows and all that. And I mean, we went extensively.
Right.
We spent a lot of money. And based on the budget of the people that I had in 2007, Ike hits, and I ain't seen them since. So we've been playing scuffle and catch up.
Scuffle and catch up with attendance and membership attendance.
With an 2007 budget, if you will, in terms of building, paying for the building. And then you got a 2023 crowd. And of course, Ike was compounded with COVID.
Right.
So navigating, negotiating those two things.
Wow.
Has been quite challenging.
Okay. So, and Pastor Tillman, you are to be commended for your services to the West Point Church and to your 30-year services at the helm of presidency at the Baptist Ministers
That was
Association.
almost an accident.
So how was that an accident? I know previous you succeeded Pastor A.S. Johnson.
A.S. Johnson, who served twice.
Okay.
Served as president twice. When he was coming out of office, he was president, and Reverend B.J. Hunter was his first vice. I can't remember who the second vice was.
Okay.
But B.J. Hunter was coming out with him. They both were going out. Well, when they developed the Committee on Permanent Organization,
Mm-hmm.
it was those two, Hunter and Johnson, who would be on the committee, and they picked three.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Stinson, Wren, and Barnes.
Oh wow.
Was it Barnes or Lee? Yeah, Barnes.
Wow.
And so you had a 3-2 vote on who would be the next president.
Okay.
Well, Johnson really thought the weight of being president, they would just kind of give him what he wanted. He wanted him to try him to be his successor.
Okay.
But they say, no, we didn't watch this Tillman boy. I was leading the Congress at that time of my association.
Right.
And they just demanded to know, you got to see this guy in action.
Mm-hmm. So did you have a fellowship with him at that time period? Did you kind of?
Not nearly as it was toward the end.
Right.
What happened was when he accepted the 3-2 vote,
Mm-hmm.
and the body accepted everything, then over the years, when he saw that I wasn't trying to dethrone him,
Right. Right.
or anything, or take away any of his, glory and
Right.
like that,
Right.
then it morphed into he not so bad.
Right.
But he pledged that he would be one of my greatest supporters as president
Right.
in going out, and he was that.
So Pastor A.S. Johnson served at the Jerusalem Church for approximately 50 years. And that brings me to this closing part. I know that Pastor A.S. Johnson served at the Jerusalem Church for 50 years. The Reverend Frank Johnson, F.M. Johnson, served 50 years at First Baptist in Texas City.
Yeah, it's 50 something.
Yes. And then I want to close out, and we're going to come back and do another second part to this, because we're going to close out with the Reverend Dr. D.N. Benford, serving 72 years at one church.
This will be his 73rd year.
73rd year. That's not including the other churches that he pastored. And so just made the Guinness Book of World Records.
Now, the interesting thing about it is, and his numbers are easy to keep up with.
Okay.
He was born in 30.
He was born
in 1930.
He was born in 1930?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
At 93.
Right. So he's 93.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
He was born in 30 and he hit Rising Star in 50.
Okay.
So he was 20 when he got the Rising Star.
Wow.
And that's my easy way of keeping up with his number.
Right.
Now, on the other side of that, like you say, there was another rising star down in the Warden area that he was pastoring, that he believes gave birth to this one. Members from Warden moved this way to work on the wharf, working the plants and so forth.
Okay.
And then they organized a church, and they took the home church name, Rising Star, and named that. And
he was the first pastor? No. He wasn't the first pastor. Okay. But he's been there 70, this year will be 73, and he's 93, and he's still pastoring.
Still actively pastoring.
Just recently, the Guinness Book of World Records inducted him into their books as the longest serving pastor, actively serving pastor in the country. That includes across
probably in the world.
In the world. That includes all denominations. They from what I've read, they stress.
There are several guys in Houston that I know of that have hit branch. Like
East Stanley Branch
hits over 60.
Okay.
And the F.N. Williams Sr. is behind Bill for just a bit. This is his 65th year.
And he's still pastoring.
He's still pastor.
Wow.
He and Benford started out together in Warden County.
Okay.
But when Benford came to Texas City, he went to Beaumont.
Wow.
And then when his daddy died, they called him to Houston.
Wow.
So that's how he wound up being behind Benford in terms of one pastor in one church that long. But 65 ain't nothing to sneeze at.
Right. So
I don't intend to keep up with either one of them.
You don't intend to.
I don't intend.
So do you think that, and I believe this, because Pastor Gates pastored till he was 87. He passed away as the pastor with 44 years. I've always felt, because I've seen the weight of it, I've seen the condition of it, I've seen the position, the condition, the weight, and a lot of other things associated with pastoring in that tenure for that long. In many instances, I know that back in the days, they used to say that it was an indefinite role and position. And in many instances, a lot of pastors didn't retire. They died in the ministry.
A lot of that was because they didn't have any other form of income. They didn't have any type of retirement or anything.
Right.
So that had a lot to do with it.
Right.
And then some of the pastors just couldn't let it go.
Right.
And they're on their sick bed and everything else, but they still wouldn't let the church go.
Which in turn, do you think hurts the church?
I think it's a hurt to the church. And I don't want to be like that. If I get to where I can't, I want to be able to exit stage left.
Yeah, that's how
the church.
That's how I feel about it. So we do know that
I don't think you can retire from preaching.
Right.
But from pastoring.
Right. And I agree with you 100%.
If I had to do like old man Wheat used to say about John the Apostle, he said he just say little children. But I don't want to be the pastor that long. Amen.
I want to do a second part to this soon, because I want to talk about Trinity Baptist. I want to talk about Mount Pilgrim, First Union, and St. Luke. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you tuning in today to hear about the African American Baptist Church in Texas. Dr. Tillman has a wealth of knowledge historically. We're going to talk about this in detail and many other things, succession planning. But thank you for tuning in today. If you are tuned in today and you don't know the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as your personal Savior, we as Christians, we extend this invitation to you to repeat after me. Lord, I know I need you, and I want you to come into my heart. I confess that whatever I did sinfully, that you would forgive me, receive me, restore me, and welcome me in. And if you can receive that in your heart, we welcome you to attend a local church of your choice, West Point, Gethsemane, Jerusalem, a church of your choice where you can be fed the word of God and your life can be lined up with the Lord as your personal Savior. We invite you to any one of these services. Pastor Tillman, your church services start at what time?
8:45.
8:45 a.m. and you're out, to finish up your Sunday. We begin here at the Gethsemane Church at 11 o'clock. This particular coming Sunday, we're going to start at 10:30 a.m. because we're going over to Progressive for 12 o'clock noon for their church anniversary.
So J.S. Simpson going to see Hinton.
Yes. What a way to end it. God bless you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. Next Wednesday, same time, same channel.